Welcome, citizens of the globe, to the Frontend Heroes podcast, where we discuss all things villainous and heroic about the front end of software development. My name is Evan Payne, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Scott Francis. How are you, Scott?
I'm really good. I'm back from a 3-week break where I did very little, apart from play with the children, which was really nice. And I'm currently sitting in a quite wet and windy England, which makes a change.
Nice. Yeah, I also took a vacation of sorts, didn't go anywhere, stayed in my sweat box in Spain. But it was nice to have some downtime. Today's episode, as usual, is sponsored by NetCentric, an award-winning Adobe Global Alliance partner. Both Scott and I work here as senior front-end software engineers, and we are glad as ever to have their support with this show. Speaking of taking some time off, you might have noticed that we have not been around the last few months, and that ties neatly into the topic of this month's or week's podcast, which is mild-mannered alter ego, implying a connection to the private identities of superheroes, and we're talking about work-life balance. Both Scott and I previously planned to do the podcast even while on holidays, and for both of us, it just didn't materialize. And I think that plays into this idea of I'll speak for myself. I'd been working really hard. There was deadlines, there were things that needed to be done. I wanted to do it the best quality possible, and I needed a break. And then it was like another month and a half before I could take a break. So by the time I got into that longish for me, 3-week vacation, I did some coding, but I needed to switch off entirely for a while, and I was grateful to have done so. What about you, Scott? How's that played out for you this current time?
Yeah, I think pretty much the same. Like I was busy working, busy on projects, but the whole work situation just like really intensified because of COVID and because we were all working from home. Now I've got to say that my team was great and we didn't really miss a beat, but the working conditions were like far from ideal. And so that kind of like built up. And I was very aware that I got these 3 weeks coming up where I could actually switch off. And the closer that came, the more I felt that I needed it. And then as soon as it arrived, as you mentioned, we planned to do the podcast. I planned to do many things. And then the Friday that I was finishing work hit, and then I just went into complete downtime and everything just disappeared. And I have to say, I really enjoyed that. Super stressful at the beginning because also on the Friday that I was due to finish work, it looked like we were going to be locked down again, and really panicked, rearranged flights, got back to England to stay with family as soon as we could. But that was the best decision that we made because I really, really needed the break. And because we had family around us, we could really, really take advantage of that and just really enjoy the downtime.
Yeah, that's really good. I feel like especially in the tech culture, there's this push to go, go, go. And I think it was made worse by the virus going around and the global pandemic because people had more free time technically, right? They didn't have to do those commutes they did before. Meeting prep was, you didn't have to walk to another room. And there's a weird contradiction there where it seems to be like, oh, well, now I need to do more to prove my value. And it shouldn't be the case, but it's really hard to break away from that. So I think we'll talk about a few different things. One is perception of work-life balance in maybe different cultures. I can speak from the U.S. point of view, at least 11 years ago, and European, etc. But then we'll go into some other things of like why it's necessary even, and maybe even talk about the differences between being single and taking work-life balance, or how to find that, and having families and doing so as well. But let's start with the necessity for it. I think most of us have kind of run into some form of burnout over time. And I remember seeing, this is like 4 years ago on Twitter, someone being open and honest about it. And it felt like it was one of the first times it had been talked about that way of you don't think it's happening to you. You don't think it's happening to you. And then you just don't want to do anything at all because you're burnt out. You've burnt your candle at both ends and you're out of wax. It's something that needs to be acknowledged as a possibility. And once you see the signs of it, you need to take steps. Right.
I think you have to be brave. Sorry to interrupt, but I think
not at all.
I think you have to be brave enough to actually say like enough's enough, or just to recognize that you don't need to work like all the time. As you said, like in the tech industry, I think it's really difficult, particularly like front end. It moves all the time. This thing, it kind of feels like you're always behind a little. Somebody else always knows more than you do. Somebody else is working on something, a new framework or something, or like there's just something new has come around, and it can be easy to feel like you're falling behind. So try and put extra effort in, like outside of the workplace. But you to come to like peace with yourself really and say like, I can't possibly do all of these things because otherwise I will get burned out, is quite a brave thing, I think. And I think this is where like a good company, comes in. Like, I think I've talked in the past about like companies I've worked for in the UK as opposed to companies, like companies in Spain. And I think that particularly in the UK, I've always felt that the pressure is more like you would be contracted for 40 hours, but it would almost be expected that you would work an extra 10. And then your boss might ask you, oh, do you know about this? Like some new technology. And there would almost be like an implication that you should know about that, even though you're working like 10, 15 more hours than you actually should be. But then when you're finished with that, you should be working even more to keep current. And I think that as soon as a company is like that, then you are gonna burn your staff out, or you're just gonna have them leave.
I think
really different.
I think you're absolutely right that having some emotional intelligence from the company you work for is a big part of this. Having a system where you at least have someone you can check in with every now and then, because especially if you're working by yourself, and now that we're all working at home, if you're not on Slack and chatting with friends and being honest all the time, you don't say it out loud, then you don't notice it necessarily. And so having a culture where you can at least talk through and being like, why am I so upset about this? And the frustration is one sign. Feeling like it's overwhelming as well. Like there's either too much on, or there's too many open questions. You notice it most when you're recovered, that it's not so difficult to leave some gaps in your knowledge. But when you're already at the edge, that can really just send you into a dark spiral.
Yeah, I mean, like if it starts going around in your head that you don't know enough, I mean, I've encountered this at times, like when I genuinely haven't known enough, or I've not known as much as I would want to. But it was when it was times when I was like either starting out or a junior on a project. So trying to put the extra effort in there, but I've always found it difficult to rationalize, oh, well, I am a junior on this project, so maybe I don't need to know all of this. Maybe it's okay that there's some gaps in my knowledge. I think it was worse then, because I was always trying to fill those gaps like as soon as I possibly could, which is a good thing. But if that's impacting on your home life, if that's impacting on you come home from work and then you start trying to work a bit more to fill in gaps that you think shouldn't be there, then you are gonna find that you're burned out. And if you don't take time to actually do things that you enjoy, I mean, with front end people, I think there's a high amount of people who would code as a hobby, and so that old thing when like people want to be footballers or like rock stars or something like that. And so
Right.
like, they want to do something that's their hobby and they want to get paid for that hobby. Well, I think there's a lot of people in the tech industry, it's particularly front end, who are getting paid for their hobby. They would do this like regardless of whether they got paid. So I think that's quite lucky. But if you have other interests, it's important to switch off from the tech, and it's important to invest some time in your other interests. And the more junior you are, I think that the harder that is, because you're always trying to push yourself a little bit further to learn some more.
Yeah. Before we move on to another point there, but specifically in the front end, and specifically with, I don't know, conferences and Twitter and things like that, it really becomes a kind of, and I don't think the people that are posting necessarily intend it to be that way, but it can be overwhelming the amount of things that they are achieving, or that it seems to be. Same thing with any social media. You're seeing the sunnier sides. But that you're just working on, some really complex CSS that applies to that particular situation, and it's taking you 2 days, but it is valuable to this context, but it's not something that helps the whole community. And these people are constantly posting these great tools and frameworks and things that help the whole community, and it can feel like, gosh, I am just so far behind where I want to be. And if you let yourself feel that way, you can really make it hard for yourself to enjoy the work. And I think that is what, like you said, myself included, a lot of us came from this point of view of, let me try this out. Does that work? No. Why doesn't it work? Okay. Hey, I got it working. It's amazing, right? You go from, I'm the stupidest person in the world, this doesn't work, to, I did it, I'm a genius. And that kind of high is one of the reasons we really enjoy the work we do. But if you set your challenges, you set too many challenges, that is just as bad. It's the same as setting yourself up for failure. And of course, it's going to be stressful.
Yeah, totally. I mean, one thing, you almost have to accept that you're going to not know some things, and that's the good bit of the job, like that you don't know, and then you do make it work. But it's important to recognize that is going to be the case. It's going to be a bit where you don't know, and you might seem to be going around in circles, and where you might think that is wasted time and unproductive time, that's just the job. That's how it works. Like, I'm not saying that you should be happy that every task takes longer than you think it should, but there are going to be some times when something's really complex and you just don't know what you're doing wrong. It even comes down to like micro bits where you're doing something that you've already done, and for some reason it's not working, and maybe you're going around in circles a little bit. At that point, there's more value in just getting up from your desk and going and taking a walk for 20 minutes, or drinking a coffee, or sitting and playing the guitar for 10 minutes or whatever, like just taking yourself away from it. But even with, you could even find yourself like piling more stress onto yourself by just continuing to sit at your computer. Like, it would just...
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little more about that. So we've talked about how the work itself can be overwhelming, but the solution to that is to balance this out with the things you do in the rest of your life, right? I don't know about you, but for a while it was not that easy for me to remember to do those things. And there's two scales, right? There's the micro, which is, okay, you're feeling like this problem's hard to solve. Get up, go for a walk. By the time you come back, 15 minutes, 20 minutes later, you'll probably have an inkling of where to go next. It doesn't always work, but most of the time it does. Or like we said, taking snack breaks, or finishing at a hard time. And then there's the macro of, okay, one of the reasons the job is interesting is that you have these ongoing threads that occur over multiple periods of time, sprints or months or whatever you want to refer to them as. You should have those things going on in your life as well. Maybe it's, finishing a certain novel or a multiple amount of novels, or I don't know. So let's flip it around. What are some of the things that you have going on in your regular life that help you take a step back from your work life?
Well, for a long time, it was music. It was basically like I played in a band, and so like I was quite dedicated to that. So there would be set hours every week that we would rehearse, and then I would sit and like write songs, and it was just things to take me away from the day job, which really interested me. But played a lot of sport in my younger years as well. But then the biggest thing now is is that I have children. And like there is no bigger reason to take a step back from the work than your kids. Like they force you to do it. They can be a flip side to this as well. Like if you're pressured, if you have all projects get like genuine like hard deadlines, and we come up against those sometimes. We need to finish those off. The children just don't care. Like they need your attention. They need taking care of, and so sometimes they're the natural thing. Like going out and taking them out at the weekends or after school and things like that. They naturally stop you from working too much. Occasionally, that would mean that you would have to work after the kids have gone to bed to kind of catch up. But that has to be really like absolutely essential, because once the kids have gone to bed, the day's kind of finished really. Like you're really tired by that point. The chances of you actually going back to work and like looking into new tech, they're kind of gone. I mean, like if you really want to do that kind of thing, then I think that would be a path to burnout pretty quickly. Yeah, like before I've had hobbies, and I still have those, but now the natural thing for me is the kids stop that.
Well, I think that you need to have discipline if you're going to break up your day that way. And it's interesting, the modern culture and a lot of the more, I don't know, like we said, emotionally intelligent companies, they do provide for flexible working hours. So if you're the kind of person that gets up at 7 and you want to start then and finish at 3, most of the time that's going to be okay at these kind of companies. And I guess if you're freelance, you can kind of set your own hours so you can balance that. I think the important thing though is to set the boundaries. Having had a few Spanish lunches in my time, that kind of balance does not work for me, which is to say, if I go off and have a lunch and a glass of wine and then try and get back to work an hour and a half later, those last 2 or 3 hours of work are not going to be very productive. So it's almost as if, why did I do that?
Yeah, but
you have to. Yeah,
you can kind of manage that though. I mean, like, yeah, I'm also a big fan of the Spanish lunch, but it's a great thing about living there. I mean, but it's just recognize that like the hours after that lunch are not going to be that productive. The natural way for me to combat that is I will start at 7:00. So, so the hour after lunch, which I still need to complete, could be taken up doing like admin kind of things, like things that need doing, they need taking care of, but not necessarily getting like deep into the code and really like putting like all your focus in. Like for me, I've always found that I'm better in the mornings anyway. So my productive hours are going to be before lunch. And so the earlier that I can start, the better that is, the more productive hours that I'll get in. I've never been, even at university, I was really disciplined with hours that I worked. I only worked like 9 till 5 when I was at university. As soon as 5:00 came, I was done.
Yeah, see, so I'm not that way, or I wasn't. I'm much more that way now. I've learned to set some hard boundaries. So for me, it doesn't matter when I start the day necessarily, but I need to end the day at 5. And yes, circumstances will come up. There are times where that doesn't happen, but that hard ending at least gives me a goal to shoot for. Everyone's aware that that's basically when they need to stop asking me things. And it helps make the transition, especially working from home, to being away from work. Like I said, doesn't always work. This whole time has just gotten weird. But when I was young, I was not like that at all. It was, I need to keep going on this until I'm done, especially when I was doing like filmmaking and stuff. We wouldn't even hang out and meet and talk about scripts and what we're going to shoot the following day until like 9 p.m. And we'd usually be up until 2 or 3 going through that, and then wake up around 10 the next morning because it's just a different lifestyle. Now I can't imagine that. It's too much flexibility and too little discipline.
Also, the natural boundaries are in there for you as well. I guess, like with the family, like it would just be unworkable. I mean, I very similar when I was like making music. We would go and record stuff, and yeah, that would go into the night. That wouldn't like it was kind of. You didn't really feel like playing at like 9 a.m. I mean, that was just,
Right.
you just wouldn't do that. There would be no feel to it. So it was naturally like a later thing. But now this is work, like for big companies, for big projects. So it's completely different in that respect. It's no less, I would say, no less creative, but for me requires a different kind of focus, which I would naturally get in the mornings rather than late at night.
So from my side in the the hobby field, or the what I do on my downtime, yeah, like I have my family, we hang out, we usually play video games together. There's a lot of that good stuff going on. But I have a tendency, I came to this, excuse me, I came to this field from a hobby, which is to say, since university, I was coding as just kind of getting things to work and experimenting. And, it was only after a lot of years of sort of fiddling and tinkering that I realized I could start to make some money off of it. And so my hobby, my side projects turned into my full-time work, which is great because I love what I do, but it's hard to stop that. Point in case, even on my 3-week vacation, I spent a good number of hours coding on this side project because I'm passionate about it. I really want this side project to work and understand the methods I'm doing it. The thing that I found there, because that could have also just perpetuated the level of tension and borderline burnout that I was feeling. What I found was not to put pressure on execution. So as opposed to work where you have deadlines and deliveries, I said, okay, well, I probably can get this done in a week. So the deadline for this is 3 weeks, which gives me so much more buffer. And it meant I could spend a day not doing any coding on the side project, a few hours one day, maybe do an intent session another day. But there wasn't pressure to get it done, which meant it remained fun. And if I did feel like it was annoying, I could just step away for the rest of the day and go on to other things. That's something I wish we had more at, like proper work as well.
Yeah, I mean that's what keeps your interest up, right? That's what still makes it a hobby, that you can actually put it down and just like say, "Oh, I'm not feeling it today, so I'm going to go and do something else." I mean, like, yeah, I do agree. I think that there's, but I also think that now with the situation with COVID and the pandemic and everybody working from home, I think that people will be much more, companies will be much less inclined to like cut you that slack. I mean, like money's going to be tight for like businesses globally. So like there's going to be pressure to make sure that every minute counts. But with that comes again the specter of burnout for people, and almost, if I was a company, I wouldn't really want to be seen to like be policing the employees like really tightly, because because we will all feel pressure naturally. Like we all know the situation. We all know that like the global economy is probably going to suffer. And is suffering, actually, not even probably, is suffering. So we would all like have that pressure in the back of our minds as well. Like I think this is really going to be, this is a transition to home working for like like companies everywhere, and it's really like a time that they're going to have to start learning like the amount of pressure that they apply to their employees, to still make them productive and just steer them away from this, like the specter of burnout, to steer them away, to allow them the kind of freedom that you're talking about with your side project, to kind of like get the balance right for genuine projects, for actual client projects, which do have deadlines, and how everybody starts to factor that in, because clients are going to have to be made aware of this as well. I mean, like, and they're going to be aware of it because they already have a core business, and they're going to face the same problems with their own employees, and then the people that they employ to make websites and web applications, they're going to know that as well. So I think it's really like challenging times and interesting times, and I think this is going to be where really great companies, like, they really grasp that straight away. They really understand that the mental well-being of their employees is going to be something that they're really going to have to focus on.
Yeah, I agree. It makes me think as well of this idea of, well, like 30-hour work weeks or 20-hour work weeks that people talk about, or even countries like France wanted to at one stage just say like, nope, we're only going to work 30 hours per week, and everyone was like, no way, how could you ever do that? But in some ways, it's an acknowledgement of the fact that there's a key level of productivity per day, and once you achieve that, you're unlikely to do any better without sacrificing the following days. So yeah, I might have a day where I am just in the zone and I code for 8 hours straight, and that's great, 10 hours sometimes, and that feels amazing. But the next day, or maybe the day after that, yeah, I'm not productive at all. It really feels like a one-to-one sacrifice at those times. Do you think that companies are ever going to understand that there is that like optimal zone, and that not to enforce just butts in the seat for 8 hours with a 1 hour lunch break that's enforced by law, but to actually be flexible and saying like, okay, do your best work, but don't take more than you really want to?
I think that good companies probably already, and good managers kind of do that already, in my experience. For instance, as you mentioned, we could find ourselves having to work like longer than we really should, for maybe a few days, like leading up to a deadline. And so maybe you find that by like the Wednesday of a week, you've pretty much done like your required hours for the week. For me, we release on our project on Thursdays in general. Now, if the lead up to that is like by Thursday lunchtime, you've done more than enough hours for the week. I think in my experience, people would say on the Friday, okay, like any loose ends you have, tie them up, and then like just like take the time back, go and relax, have a good weekend. Like, thanks for your work. I think it is completely pointless in my experience to actually force bombs to be on seats. Like it's so counterproductive. You're required. The work that you need to get done is done. You've pushed through like many barriers to get there, and then it's just nice for a manager for somebody senior to, or looking after the team, to just say thank you. You've done so well. It's been amazing. Like, now go and take the time back. Go and put your feet up, read a book, whatever you want to do. But like, you don't need to sit here. I think in terms of working hours, I mean, it's always been, of course, everybody would like to work like less hours, but in Barcelona, and I have to say I'm hazy about this, whether I think it's Spain in general, or our sector. But in August, we work 4 less hours a week, right? Yeah, it's 4 less hours a week. For me, so that drops us down to 36 hours. And it means that we work 7 hours without a lunch break on 4 of the days. And I've got to say, like, it's a life changer for me, it's only 4 hours, but for me, it's just completely amazing. It means that I can be done by 2 in the afternoon, and like I've been productive. I felt like I've been productive, and it's just completely changes my work-life balance. And it's only 4 hours.
That's interesting.
Like for me, the biggest change that I would like to see is that that's adopted for the whole year, because it completely, for me, it just completely changes my life. Like it really does. Like the work-life balance just goes. It feels more. There feels like more of an equilibrium.
Well, it's interesting. What it's like, I've mostly disregarded it because it none of the rest of my team, well, some of my team are on it, but for me, it just hasn't had much of an impact, and no one's really like forcing me to. And the thing is, okay, I'm contracted 40 hours a week, but I'm usually at the computer doing things many more hours than that. Not necessarily always for the company, but it just expands. And the more responsibility you take on, the more likely you're going to be putting in more hours than you maybe even write down on paper. And I generally encourage like my own proteges to not allow that to happen. So the next bit I want us to talk about before we wrap up is just how you actually can stand your ground against assumptions and things, or even your own level of care or guilt, as it might be. How you stand up for that. So again, from my point of view, I often have the problem of I really want to do well and I want to help. So if that means staying an extra hour, even within my time frame, but instead of taking that lunch break, staying at the desk to have a conversation with someone, or taking a call to help with the sales lead, something like that, on top of the project work I know that I have to get done, well, I'll probably say yes. I know I shouldn't, but it's just part of being, for me, a good colleague, a good employee. But that doesn't always drive with work-life balance. And that also, the stacking of responsibilities can really lead to difficult times. How do you handle that? What are some strategies that people can use to help them stake their claim, peel the ground out in the right way?
Yeah, it's a for me. It's a it's difficult to. I don't really have like a strategy where I would say like, okay, this is like I'll do this and I'll do no more, or if I take this on, then this has to drop off. But as I mentioned before, for me, it's pretty straightforward. Like the way my life is, I have to collect the children at like 4:30, and there is no ifs or buts about that. Like it has to happen. Nobody else is, if I don't go there, then they're going to be sitting on the steps at school. So like that makes it pretty easy. I have to, and everybody, and I've made people aware of this. Like if it's going to be, if you need to ask me a question after 4:00, it's going to be answered the next day. So for me, the boundaries there are determined by that. I don't think that obviously they weren't always. And I think I was actually pretty poor at separating work-life balance, really. When I think now, I would think nothing of staying an extra hour or two, like 2, 3, even like 4 times a week. I would really think nothing of that, like, because you kind of got into it. And what I used to try and have then is places to be. Set things up outside of work, which, make commitments, make arrangements, make. It's very, if it was just to go and read a book, then you're easily cancelable. Like you could easily just say, oh well, I wanted to go and read a book, but I didn't. I stayed 2 hours extra at work. But if you have something arranged, if you're meeting somebody, if you're meeting somebody or you're going to go and play sport with somebody, you're going to go and have a coffee with somebody. Like make hard arrangements, like make reasons to actually leave. You could always, if you have nothing outside, then it's easy to sit at your desk, because most of the time, the work is interesting. Like we do enjoy it. I mean, there's no way that we can say that we don't. If you didn't enjoy the job, then that's a completely different podcast. But like, so it's easy to find yourself sitting at your desk if you don't make hard arrangements and make commitments to go and do something else. So for me, that would be the biggest strategy. Just make sure that you have something else that forces you away from the desk.
Yeah, I think that is a really excellent strategy, and it works. Like you say, with the children, we usually have that built in because of school and all. Lately, that hasn't been a thing, so that makes it a little more difficult. But having appointments is a great strategy. Another one I would say is try not to have your primary communication tools on your mobile. That's not always an option, but certainly set your away hours so you don't get the notifications in, let's say, Slack or even email necessarily. I'm terrible at that. If someone messaged me at like 7, I'll at least read it, if not respond. But managing the expectation to say they may or may not get a response, at least the start towards that. And certainly on other devices around the house, none of those things are installed. So I do not want, when I'm reading whatever comics or books on my iPad, I don't want to get any work notifications there. That's away from this all. So that helps too. And at the end of the day, you just need to find what works for you. And if you're feeling imbalanced, then it's worth re-examining. All right, so getting a little close to the end of the show, we're going to go into our segment, True Heroes. And the segment, we like to highlight some true front-end heroes working across the planet and to thank them for all that they do. So my own nomination, which Scott, you haven't had the pleasure yet of experiencing this person, is Adam Wathan. I hope I pronounced his name right. He's a creator or co-creator of Tailwind CSS, which is a utility CSS framework. And I hesitate to call it that because for me, it's more of a mindset shift. But one, I really love the framework and I think it's great. And two, I've seen this guy really put out, at least on Twitter and his blog, inspiring and useful things for developers. So the thread that he posted the other day was all about saying like, well, if you're putting together a new product and you're about to launch it and you're hemming and hawing over the landing page, it's probably already too late. All that marketing work needs to be done in advance. And he recommends doing it through like learning in the open, writing articles. And when you're in the moment of building the product and you're excited about different technologies, that's the time to blog about it, not later on after it's ready to ship and you've gotten everything perfect. And giving things away for free is an easy way to build a proper audience so that when you do monetize it, the money is there and waiting rather than not being closed doors all the time until it's time. For me, just sharing that knowledge and just putting it out there is a great thing that he does from the community. And while it does touch on the things we were talking about earlier of, hey, look at how well this person is doing, it still is an inspiration. And I just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate this guy for doing the work that he's been doing.
That's cool. That's really cool. As you say, I've not really not seen too much, but I've seen you tweeting about Tailwind, and I'd be super interested to check that out and like have you talk about that as well and your experiences of that, because I know that you're super into it at the moment.
Yeah, I think maybe we have another episode talking about at least CSS architectural approaches, as I think that's a pretty in-depth topic that we could get into.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So next segment, as we know, any proper hero is a well-rounded one. So we want to share some simple musical picks. So Scott, what's the favorite thing that you've been listening to lately?
Well, I think inspired by my return to my hometown, I have some friends who they've got a really good band. They didn't ever make it so big, but big enough, and they recorded like 3 albums. And their group is called Alpha 9. They've got some, I would really recommend checking them out on Spotify. They've got a couple of really great albums. A couple of I think there's probably a little bit of like Englishness in there, but I think that we do music really well. So I would check out Alpha 9.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I was just checking to see if I hadn't shared this, but I guess even if I have, from my side, there's this. I guess he's from the US. This Photay, Photay. He has a new album out called Waking Hours. Hard to describe the genre. Yeah, I'm not very good at figuring out because I like to bend the genres together, but that's on repeat a lot. It's calming and intricate and the kind of stuff that I like. So not necessarily for coding. I usually put it on when I'm walking around town at the grocery store, but yeah, it's a very good album. So with that out of the way, all right, looks like that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you should like or heart or star us in your podcatcher of choice. Reviews and ratings are how those fancy algorithms help people find our content, and the power to help is within you. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in our next episodes, send a tweet to us at Heroes Frontend, and we will add it to our list. Until next time, heroes, remember, with great front-end power comes great responsibility. See you next time.